Oh, fuck. Oh, shit, fuck. Hey, if you're watching this, then chances are you struggle with breach flashes. Lots of people struggle with breach, and chances are it's because of how you position in Valorant. But I'm gonna break it down easy for you so you can stop getting massacred by flashes and complaining about it on Twitter. And for the record, I'm not saying that I don't understand the struggles of dealing with an agent like Breach. He is incredibly obnoxious to play against. However, the reason that he's so obnoxious is because he forces you to play differently, and a lot of the players who just choose to not adapt to that are going to struggle versus him. The easiest example of this is if you choose to play a one and done versus an agent that has a flash. When that flash comes at you, if you do not dodge it, you're probably just going to die. You have no fallback plan. If this flash hits you, you have nowhere to go. You're just going to sit in that corner. You can't see anything. You hopefully will spray him down. But this is why playing positions like that against agents like Breach is a very bad idea. And that's not to say that you can never play a spot like this, but you need to pick and choose when you do play those spots and have some parameters set in place so that it works better. One of those parameters being expect the flash. If you know that a flash could come, you should be prepared for it. A lot of players play positions like this, and then when a flash comes out of nowhere, they're like, ah, shit, I didn't see that coming. Like, you haven't been flashed by Breach the last 15 rounds. One of the other parameters for playing a position like this is you should have somebody baiting for you, and this applies in most situations, even without flashes. You really shouldn't play a one and done if you're the only one there because you're just going to get cleared out and killed. Hopefully you guys are starting to understand the point, which is you have to play differently if there is a breach on the enemy team, and this is actually nothing new to Valorant. Take a look at an agent like Astra, for example. You have to adapt your playstyle because of her stars. You can't destroy them. So when you see a star on the ground, you're either going to have to bait it out or avoid it entirely and go to a different area. Generally, you're probably going to bait it out because otherwise, if you push and she sucks all of you, you're just going to die. She's not the only example though. Let's take a look at Sage, a character that is very good at stopping pushes. She has her wall, she has her slow. If you try to full rush the Sage, you're generally just going to get caught in slow orbs, maybe hit by raise grenades, maybe hit by other utility, and it's just really not going to be a good time for you. So you need to adapt and you need to make sure to take out the Sage wall at the beginning of the round and then bait out her slow orbs before you guys push. Otherwise, you're just going to be running into a wall. Because of an agent on the enemy team, you need to adapt your playstyle. But how are you going to adapt? That's the question. Well, I'm going to tell you. But not until after this Patreon ad. If you guys are looking to stop sucking at Valorant, then have I got a deal for you. Head on over to patreon.com/CaseyKing and you can get access to all of our other VOD reviews, as well as getting the chance to get your review too, as well. This is a great way to support the channel while also getting access to more content. So yeah, if you wanted that, link in the description below. Now, the first thing you're probably going to think to do is fall back really far on site and play scared. However, this is a bad idea versus a breach because then he is going to have all of his utility for that one moment when they push you on site. This is where you'll run into those situations where the breach will flash you 3 times and kill you, and at that point, there's nothing that you could have done. You lost because you made a mistake earlier in the round. This was a massive issue when I played League of Legends, and this is where a lot of people get lost in competitive games. I know not all of you played League of Legends though, so I'm going to try to keep this comparison brief and to the point. So in League, characters would get stronger by killing enemy players, and a lot of the times what you'd see from worse players is that they would die 2 to 3 times in the early game to these enemy players, and then at the end of the game when they're getting one shot by that guy, they complain and say that that character is broken. They fail to understand that yes, that character is broken right now, but that's only because they let them kill them 2 to 3 times in the early game. Once again, they are strong now because we didn't kill them earlier. Now, how does that compare to Valorant? Because obviously I don't get stronger by killing enemy players in Valorant. Well, rather than having your first point of contact be on the back of the site, what you want to do is get a teammate and have your first point of contact be over an area of control. Now, keep in mind there are 2 ways to win this encounter. The first is to successfully take control of the area and have the offense back up. Potentially you grab a kill or 2. That would be awesome. Obviously, this is great. Your team has grabbed control and you didn't lose any bodies. The second way that you can win this encounter, though, oftentimes goes overlooked. And that's when you've baited out utility that they won't have for later in the round. Breach has 3 flashes. It is a really good idea to bait some of that out earlier so you don't have to deal with it all on site or even post-play. Now, to clarify, that doesn't mean die over these locations, but you have to show just a little bit of pressure to get them to actually use their utility. Otherwise, they're just going to walk directly up B long and then execute once they get towards site. And when you're dealing with it at that point, you've already lost. Breach is incredibly difficult to deal with when he's running at you throwing flashes. And this is why if you're not playing for territory on the map, you should be playing in a position where you can spot for info and then fall back if you get pushed. And this is going to be a situation that you're going to run into a lot, so listen up here. To really discuss this, we need to talk about positioning a bit. Valorant is a game of give and take. In each game, you have 5 players and you need to allocate where you're going to put those players. In other words, we could refer to these players as resources. Meaning, if you allocate a lot of your resources to doing one thing, you're not going to have a lot of resources to do a different thing. So if you have a lot of players pushing up solo in different positions, this is going to be very susceptible to being punished because you're spreading your resources out, and if that solo player gets swung by 2 of the enemy players, he's probably just going to get traded out. This is why generally when pushing to grab territory on defense, you don't want to do it solo, because even if you come out with the trade, your team is still at a loss on defense because you have 2 bomb sites to defend and they have 4 players to push that bomb site, meaning that you have to spread out your resources to cover those 2 bomb sites and they have 4 players to attack the bomb site. They only have to pick one. This is why, although it's important to fight for territory on defense as to not let the offense walk all over you, it's also important to recognize when you are not in a power position on defense and you need to play back for retake. A common example of this is on Ascent. What happens when the offense puts a lot of resources towards A and your team starts to rotate? Well, oftentimes you have one player who stays back on B and they watch B. Now, where would you normally defend if you are the only player watching B site? A lot of players might think to hunker down in the back of boat room. However, this is a really bad idea because if you get pushed, no one can help you. Now, although sitting in the back of site and tanking 3 breach flashes is pretty heroic, it's also not the smartest decision. Instead, what you want to do is play a position where you can spot and maybe look for a pick and then fall back with your team to retake together. You may hear this a lot, by the way, play with your team, and although it seems obvious, let's go into that a little bit more. The reason it's so important is imagine if you're playing Sova and you shoot a recon dart, right? Your recon tags 3 people, and because of that recon, you're able to pick up 1 kill, which is awesome. But now let's imagine that you have a teammate there when you shoot that recon, and now it tags 3 people and you pick up 2 kills. You have effectively doubled the value that you got out of that recon dart because you just used it when your teammate was there instead. Nothing was different. You shot the same recon, it tagged the same people, but because you had a teammate there, he was able to capitalize on your utility as well and get a kill from it. So many times players are looking to make plays solo and fight people off, when in reality, it's just the better decision to wait for your team so you can actually perform a full retake together. And it's very difficult to do that if you place yourself in a position where Breach is just going to throw flashes at you and you're going to get trapped in a corner. Notice in this first round from this VCT game, there are 3 players on A, and because of this, Dapper is playing off-site on C. If he plays on-site and gets pushed, he knows nobody's going to be there to help him, so he's going to play back. Notice how in this second round, they still have 2 players on A, and because of this, Sick is not going to fight over garage control, because he knows if he's going to do this, he's going to do it alone, and if he gets full pushed in garage by 5 people while he's sitting there alone, it's not going to work out too well for him. Instead, Dapper places a tripwire in garage, and they double up on C site where they have a little bit more strength in numbers. Obviously, they're professional players, and there's a lot more that goes into this, but that's just like a basic example for you. Now, the last thing I want to comment on before we move on to offense is just understanding basic flash locations and how to counter them. For example, a common flash location on Haven would be on back of site. If you flash the default box, then it'll flash all of back of site, and this can be really obnoxious to deal with. But if you position yourself in a spot where it won't get hit by that flash, then it'll make it a lot less oppressive to deal with. For this reason, a position like Logs is actually really strong to deal with breach flashes. It's all about understanding where these characters are going to flash normally, so if you haven't played Breach or Skye or Phoenix or Yoru or any of the flash characters, I do recommend just giving them a shot, get a feel for how they would normally flash so that you can avoid it in the future. But most of these tips are focused on dealing with offense so far, so how do you deal with defense? Well, for starters, this is where we introduce something called playing Counterflash. If your team is struggling with aggressive flash plays out the gate, oftentimes having a player play Counterflash can be really good for dealing with that. This is where one player, rather than pushing up with your team, will sit back in a position where they won't get flashed, and then when the flash goes off, they'll peek to deal with that player. Alternatively, what you can do is after that flash goes off, use a flash of your own to blind the enemy players who will peek, because generally after you flash, you'll peek after that flash, right? This is actually a great tactic for defense as well, considering that a lot of players won't just enter site without flashing or using any sort of utility. So the moment that you hear that flash goes off, that's when you throw yours and then you peek after it. Something that you'll run into a lot in the lower ranks and even in the higher ranks, honestly, is players going for these aggressive flash plays at the start of a round, and they'll do it solo a lot of the times too. If you have a player playing Counterflash and the enemy team tries to blind you and then swing, oftentimes you can pick up a kill off of that. And even if you don't pick up a kill and nothing comes of it, you have to keep in mind that you still kind of won that engagement. It's important to keep in mind that rounds are a lot longer than people realize, and even getting out one flash can be a big deal. Getting out one flash early is one flash that they're not going to have for retakes. There are no agents in the game with refreshing flashes yet, and thank God for that. Wait, can you imagine a breach flash that refreshes every 35 seconds? Oh no, not like this, not like this. These are often things that go overlooked because obviously there's not a direct impact of somebody not having a flash. I'm sure there's a word for this, so if there's somebody smarter than me, leave that in the comments below. But you know those situations where obviously you feel the impact of a flash. If somebody flashes you, that feels very impactful. But you don't necessarily feel the impact of somebody not having a flash in that situation and it turning out in your favor. So when you bait out a flash earlier in the round and then they don't have that flash for later in the round to actually make that play that they need to, that can be a big deal. Now, obviously, there are other reasons that you won the round, like you got the bomb down or somebody landed a good shot, but that flash not being there could be the make or break in them winning the round or not, if that makes any sense. There are small things that take place throughout the round that are going to make a slight difference, or in some cases a big difference on if you win the round. And that's what you guys are supposed to be doing with your 100 seconds on offense, gathering those small advantages. That means grabbing map control, that means baiting out utility, denying info. So that way, when you decide to push, either that breach is not there or he doesn't have 3 flashes to throw at you as you're pushing onto site. Now keep in mind, flashes are a tool that are meant to help your team take space. It is unreasonable to expect the enemy team to not use their flashes to take control of areas. What is important though is that you play intelligently so your entire team doesn't get wiped out by one breach flash. Furthermore, don't just have players solo pushing for territory if you know that they're playing aggressively with flashes. You want to walk up B solo while they've been flashing it every round? Really? That's the duel that you want to take? Stop playing like an idiot and instead grab a teammate and go over towards long, wait for them to flash it, and then double swing them. Flashes aren't an uncounterable tactic, and if these guys want to double swing out into the open using a flash as their only defense, I say let them. I was playing a game the other day where the enemy Phoenix kept solo peeking C long as if his flash made him god or something. We literally killed this guy like 10 rounds in a row. He thought that he was invincible from it. And people don't realize how big of a deal it actually makes when you die 2 seconds into the round. If they're playing aggressive with flashes, either let them blow their flashes and slow play it, or get your team together and go kill those players. This is just if the enemy team's on a solo mission though, trying to take that territory. If they're putting 2 to 3 players in that location, remember what we talked about with resources before. If they're placing a lot of resources in one location, they're not going to have a lot of resources for a different one. Likely, if they have 2 players towards B long, they might have 1 hookah and they might have 2 A, but there's not going to be 4 players on A because they have 2 of them on long. So in this situation, what I would say is, hey, you want to blow all your flashes on long at the start of the round? We're going to bait those out, and then we're going to regroup and go A so you don't have those for retake. These are just some ways that you can counter flashes in Valorant, though. I hope this was helpful for somebody so you can hopefully just stop dying to breach flashes. I know it can be really obnoxious, but it's also obnoxious from your teammates' perspective where you're just complaining about flashes the whole game because you don't know how to counter them. If you guys like this type of content, we have a couple of other videos like this, so be sure to subscribe to the channel down below and check those out. Also, if you wanted to check out our VOD review series on the Patreon, links for that in the description below. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video.